Hello, everybody. Dr. Z here. We are in World War II. This is going to be part 3. Here we go. So we need to talk a little bit about the resistance or the partisans in World War II. We talked a little bit about this when we talked about fascism. But from the Nazi side, there were various examples of resistance. Here, for example, is a Jewish partisan group in Belarusia. There was also a number of visual versions of resistance. This is a poster that says Germany is broken. That was disseminated in the general government by Operation N after the Battle of Stalingrad. Okay, so if you watch the last video on the Battle of Stalingrad, you'll understand why. And there's various forms of resistance. Now, there are, in Holocaust and in Nazi scholarship, there's sort of multiple ways to think about this, right? Yes, lots of people were in collusion with the Nazis, and they wouldn't have been able to do the horrible things that they did had lots of people not been in collusion with them. However, there was also a number of people who resisted, and they resisted in various different ways. Okay, so there's lots of different ways to think about this. One is sabotage, right? So the Nazis they forced locals to work for the Germans. As when we talk about German women in a later video, and work during World War II, you'll see that at least half of women, for example, were working during World War II. However, work could be done slowly, right, or intentionally badly, right? This is sabotage as a way of resistance. Also, raids on distribution offices to get food coupons or various documents, or at the birth registry offices to get rid of information about Jews. This was another form of resistance. There were uprisings, such as the one in Warsaw in 1943 and also in 1944. And there were uprisings in extermination camps, such as the ones in 1943 and 1944. And there were battles and guerrilla warfare, such between with partisans from the USSR, from France, from Yugoslavia. The idea of, remember we talked about like communists and fascists fighting in the streets when we were talking about early fascism in Italy, for example, right? So that fighting continues in Nazi Germany as well. And espionage. So sending reports about troop movements, things like that, spying on the Nazis and their military complex. Also, there was an illegal or an underground press that countered Nazi propaganda. Organizations such as the German White Rose Society that you see here is an example of this. Covertly, people could listen to the BBC broadcasts for news bulletins and coded messages from outside Nazi Germany. And then in the Netherlands, perhaps made famous by the Anne Frank story, right? Helping people hide and go into hiding due to the large number of Jews and the high level of administration, which made it easy for Germans to identify who Jews were. So there's various resistance. All is not lost. Your key concept outline wants you to understand Christian responses to totalitarianism. But before we talk about that, I think it's important to understand that most historians, and this is not part of the key concept outline, but it is a big part of Holocaust and Nazi historiography, is that most historians find the Catholic and the papal response to the Holocaust to be incredibly disappointing. Outright, just a shame, to be quite frank. David Kurtzer, who's a wonderful historian, recently looked at a lot of papal documents that were just released, and has a really interesting article that we'll look at in class about this as well. The Vatican really didn't want to get politically involved, and they really missed a big opportunity there. But the College Board wants you to understand that aside from the Vatican's disappointment, Protestant religious people were standing in opposition to the Nazis. And two examples of them are Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Martin Niemöller. Bonhoeffer is seen here. He's saying silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act, right? So silence is agreement, in other words. Bonhoeffer was a Protestant theologian, an active anti-fascist. He believed that Christians should pray and live for others. Hitler had used the Protestant churches for his own purposes. So Bonhoeffer went to London and became an English clergy member. He refused to recognize the public church, which was Hitler's church. And instead, he supported the confessional church in Germany, which was supported by many Anglican communities and was seen as not a Nazi church. And he wrote a book that justified the resistance to the Nazi regime as a moral, part of a moral reason that you should go against the Nazis. And he also participated in a conspiracy that ended up leading to Hitler's overthrowing. However, because of his participation in helping to overthrow Hitler, he was a counterintelligence service agent and a courier for communication with foreign organizations in Sweden and Switzerland. So when this whole plot, he was trying to overthrow Hitler, it failed. Bonhoeffer gets imprisoned in a basement by the Gestapo, and then he's sent to Buchenwald into the Flossenburg camps, and he was executed in 1945, just days before the end of hostilities in Europe. And there's a statue. If you go to Westminster Abbey, you can see a statue to him as a Christian martyr. The other example from the College Board is Martin Niemöller. So he is known for the famous phrase that's seen below here. First, they came for the Jews, but I did nothing because I'm not a Jew. Then they came for the socialists. I did nothing because I'm a socialist. Then they came for the Catholics, and I did nothing because I'm not a Catholic. Finally, they came for me, but by then there was no one left to help me. He was a Lutheran pastor and an anti-Nazi theologian from Germany. However, initially he supported Hitler, and he was known as being an anti-Semitic person who was against Jewish people. Then he became a founding member of that confessing church, the church that opposed the Nazification of German Protestant churches. He was imprisoned, sent to 2 different concentration camps, but he escaped execution and expressed deep regret about not having done enough to help the victims of the Nazis. All right, we are going to pause here, and part 4 is coming up next.